a couple minutes here while we let folks trickle in. So just give us a few minutes and then we'll get started. I'll probably start here in about 1 minute exactly. So we'll just give people a second. All right, and if you're just joining us, we're just giving people about 30 seconds here to trickle into the meeting, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So hang tight or refill your coffee, and we'll get rolling here shortly. All right, so I think we've got a lot of folks in, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Anthony Bonaducci. I'm one of the founders here at Cosmos Data Technologies, and today we're going to be looking at Cosmos. I want to give a special thank you to the Integrato team or I should say, who set up this webinar today. A couple notes on that. Robert was going to do the introduction here, but GoToWebinar is not cooperating as per usual. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of run this start to finish. Since we do have quite a few folks signed up to attend today, if you have any questions throughout this, feel free to drop those into the Q&A chat within the meeting interface, and we'll make sure we address those at the end. But as discussed, today we're going to be looking at Cosmos. And the way I typically describe it to people is it's the first and only fully cloud-based reporting and analytics platform that's born in the cloud and built specifically for Business Central Cloud. So obviously, as you saw when you registered for the webinar, it's kind of the de facto reporting and analytics suite for Business Central. And so that's what we'll be going through today. So I'm not a death by PowerPoint person. We're just going to hit a few slides and then we're going to pop into the product here. So we'll kind of jump right into this. You can see obviously what we have on our agenda today. One of the things I will call out is there is a special promo that the Integrato team requests to stick around till the end, and we'll touch on that and show you what kind of savings are available here. But just real quick here, I kind of introduced the company at a high level already, talked about being that de facto reporting and analytics solution for BC Cloud. But I wanted to just kind of mention, my team and I, we've been doing reporting and analytics for Microsoft ERP users for a very, very long time. And this stuff isn't rocket science. If you're on this call today, you're probably looking for a reporting and analytics platform that's very fast and performant, obviously easy to use, built for business users, secure, right? It's your data. It's important that that all remains secure, and then fully cloud-based, right? Because in today's modern business world, we want to see everything in the cloud. That's the direction we're all headed. So that's really what Cosmos is. Now, what made us famous is performance. So if you're using legacy on-prem reporting solutions, you've probably seen the issues those tools have with performance against Business Central Cloud. That's one thing we're optimized for. So on average, Cosmos reports run 48 times faster than those legacy reporting and analytics solutions. So product-wise, what I'm going to take you through in the next 40 minutes or so is going to be broken up into a few different buckets. So we're going to start out in the Cosmos portal. Think of this like your home page. This is where you're going to go to refresh existing reports, author new reports, manage users, roles, permissions, work with your data models, work with Power BI. We'll talk more about that. So this is kind of where things will kick off today. Then we'll talk about how we actually create reports in Cosmos. So I'll probably just throw together a quick financial statement just to kind of drive the point home. But to be clear, Cosmos is a one-stop shop. So whether you're building sales reports, finance, inventory, AP, AR, purchasing, manufacturing, projects, jobs, it doesn't matter. The tool is designed to read everything you want to report on and allow you to create reports in a nice, clean format. So we'll talk about that. We do have our two-way Power BI integration. So this is great for things like dashboards and analytical views of the data. So we'll show you what that looks like. But in summary, it really just makes Power BI easy to work with, removes the technical side of things there. And then once things are built in Power BI, they actually show up in your Cosmos portal with security around them and all those things you would expect. So we'll talk about that. Finally, if we have a few minutes at the end, we'll talk about kind of the data management side. So this is sort of the unsung hero of a product like this, because if the data is not addressed, all those other wonderful things like ease of use and speed and performance, like those aren't really practical. So you really have to address the data first. And then once you've done that, you're going to have a much simpler experience, creating reports and dashboards and things like that. So that's what's on the docket for today. So what I want to do, I want to switch gears and get into product. And as I mentioned, if you have questions, type those into the chat. We'll hit those at the end, and then we'll talk about the promo pricing offer at the end as well. So I'm going to switch gears here, and I'm going to pop over to my Cosmos portal. So I've logged in here. Everything is very seamless with Microsoft. We worked with Microsoft on the product early on. They invested into it early on. And you'll see here on the right-hand side, I'm signed in with my Entra ID credentials. So the same way you log into Business Central or Teams or any other, Microsoft applications is how you're going to log in here. And of course, there's multi-factor authentication for that added level of security. Now, if you are an existing Cosmos customer, because I know we have some on the call, or you're a new Cosmos customer, this is going to be great because you're going to see the latest and greatest in Cosmos. So we recently released a new version, built in about 24 customer feature requests, and some of that is showcased right here on the homepage when you sign in. So at the top, we're going to see my favorites section. So these are going to be my kind of commonly used reports and dashboards. The reality is, as an organization, you might have dozens of reports and dashboards, but there's those 5 or 6 that you use day in and day out. And so those are going to be highlighted right here at the top. And you can obviously favorite any of your content in Cosmos and just have those show up right when you land in the product. So these are kind of my commonly used things. Now, down here at the bottom is going to be all of our run history on a per user basis. So if I ran this income statement earlier this morning and I was talking to Robert about some of the numbers, and he said, well, can you just pull that report up? I want to look at that because that sounds like something's off. Obviously, I can just pull up the report and say, hey, Robert, here's that example I ran this morning. Here's that number that didn't look right, et cetera, et cetera. And so it keeps those for about 24 hours on a per user basis. So that's kind of your typical landing page. Now, the 2 core areas in the product that people tend to spend their time in are obviously going to be the report section, which you can see here on my screen, and then the Power BI section if I have that feature enabled in Cosmos. So this would be the ability to look at my Power BI reports as well. Now, one thing I want to mention, within the product, you have 2 user types. So you have what are called full users. Think of those like authors and consumers. So these would be people that are creating reports and dashboards. They can obviously wear a bunch of different hats, as you see here at the top. So you can get very granular with the roles there. And then we have light users. And these are people that just need to come in and run reports that have been shared with them. Look at a certain dashboard, drill down on numbers, things like that. So usually I get asked about users, so I just wanted to mention that, but all that's managed here and you have control over that, who can do what, who your users are, things like that. Now, another thing I want to mention here, because it's very important, is security is everywhere in this product. You have security when you log into the platform. You have security on the report level, so you can choose who can read and run reports, who can edit reports, etc. If I don't share this report with Robert, when he logs in, he doesn't see this report. So there's security there. There's security at the folder level. So if you want to say, hey, my finance team, they can access everything in the finance folder, you can do that. You can also have subfolders. So maybe there's folders within those folders and you can do security there. There's security at the data level. So if you want to set up what is called row level security, where you can actually restrict what data individual users can see regardless of the report. So maybe you have multiple companies and you say, when Robert runs this report, he's only going to see data for company A, period, full stop. He could try to run it for company B, it just won't return any data for him. So tons of security around this. I think that's really important. Now, one of the nice things, since we are built for Business Central, we're purpose built for that platform, you'll see that I have lots of different reports that I use on my demos. And one of the nice things here is you're up and running with Cosmos in about 25 minutes. Once you're live, you have access to dozens of out-of-the-box reports. So all of these will work on day one. You can use them as is, you can spin off new versions of them, you can take copies, modify them, whatever you want to do. But it's nice to know with this product, there is immediate value. I mean, literally 25 minutes, you're up and running, and then you're running reports. And obviously you can go start creating reports. So day to day on that note, if we want to run a report, you'll see there's a little run button on any of these. And I can also do that from my favorite section. So maybe I have this income statement by dimension and I want to run that. I'll click the run button. Over here on the right is where I would set my filters. So on this specific report, I just have filters for dates, but I could have dates and departments and companies and locations, et cetera, et cetera. You can have as many as you want. And I'll show you how we add those when we build a report in a few minutes. So we're going to go ahead and run this. Everything's going to spin up here in the cloud. You'll see there's a little indicator or icon just letting me know, hey, you've got something in progress. We also have what we call the job queue over here on the left, and that's where you'd see any reports or scheduled tasks, things like that, that are in progress. But usually the reports run so fast that by the time you click there, the report's already open. So we can see in this example, we have a nice clean income statement here. We've grouped things up by account categories. We don't have to do that. We could do individual accounts, subcategories, whatever we want. And then we see our dimension values here across the top. So in my sample data set, you can see those. And then on the right-hand side, we have a total column. And the beauty of this is Excel is the front end. So we're able to bake in all of that kind of friendly and familiar Excel functionality into our report template. So we don't have to run stuff and then do all this manual editing and formatting. It's just going to always look and feel how we want it to. So we have some sums over here. We've got subtotals throughout the report. And that's the general idea and why we leverage Excel. Now, there's a lot of visibility here, and that's an important piece of this because customers oftentimes want to analyze the data or figure out what's going on. So maybe you ran this report and you built it, ran it for the first time, and you're like, structurally, it looks good, the formatting's good, but then you're like, gosh, you know, that $380,000 number, that seems really high. Something seems off, you know, it's not passing the eye test. Well, the first thing you might want to do since you just built the report is just double check your work. How is that number getting pulled? So we can see here in the Cosmos side of things, we're summing up the amounts from our GL transactions table. We've reversed the sign to show that as a positive value. And down here at the bottom, we can see in that cell, we're filtered on GL account 44200 for our electronics dimension value for the month of June. So we can look at that and go, no, that's all right. So something's got to be off in BC. Maybe something got double entried or posted with an extra digit or whatever it is. And so what we can do is actually drill into that value. And sorry, my Excel online is taking its time. There we go. So now we can actually see all of that individual transaction level detail. And one of the things we see with BC reporting a lot is customers will, you know, if they're using native, they'll export data to Excel, massage it, copy paste it, and you lose that drill down capability. You lose the ability to tie back to the data. And so it's very important when you have a tool like Cosmos to realize that all of this stuff is at your fingertips. So if a number doesn't look right, we don't have to start digging through BC. We can just come in here and say, well, let me sort on this, and I want to see why this number seems so high, or let me filter, or maybe I just want to pivot the data. So you don't just have the high level report, you also have that underlying transaction detail at your disposal. So that's day-to-day just coming in running reports on demand in Cosmos. Another thing I want to mention that's very popular is the ability to automate the running and distribution of reports. So if we wanted to say have reports be scheduled, we could do that. And I'm going to refresh here. Sorry, my browser's taking its sweet time. I'm going to give it a kick. But if I pop over here and I come into the scheduling section, this is where we can actually automate the running and distribution. So maybe we have a financial package that we want to show up in our inbox on the first of every month, or maybe we have sales reports that we want the sales team to get weekly or whatever it is. That's all stuff you can configure here very easily. So you can choose what report or reports, who you want them to go out to, what days of the week, what times or days of the month, and just kind of set it and forget it. And there's really three flavors of scheduling that you have with Cosmos. You have what I call standard scheduling. So run a report every Monday at 9 a.m. and send it to Robert. Pretty straightforward. You have what we call batch scheduling. So this is very useful when customers want to parse out data to the right recipients. So maybe you have 5 different companies. Each company has its own manager. So you want to create a schedule that runs the report for company A and sends that to Bob, runs it for company B, sends it to Karen, runs it for company C, sends it to Robert. Well, Graciela is in charge of all companies, so run it for all companies and send it to her. So that's kind of the idea with batch scheduling. And then the final flavor is what we call a manual release. So you can set all that nice distribution routing, but when you're ready, you push one button and all the reports shoot out to those recipients. So that was actually a feature request from finance and accounting folks, because they said, you know, we want to use this distribution capability, but it's hard for us to schedule things because we don't always know when the books are going to be ready. So that way you can set that all up, click a button, everything sends out. And one of the things that's really important to understand, we don't nickel and dime. So if you want to send reports to 100 people and that's the way that they just need to get the data, they don't need a license in Cosmos. They're obviously not going to be able to drill down if they need that, but you can distribute reports to whomever you need to, whenever you need to. And same concept, you can use the scheduler. You could also just run a report yourself and then email it off, or share a link. And you can also have reports run automatically and drop into SharePoint folders. So you could give the sales team access to a SharePoint folder that just has reports that run every morning or whatever it is. So lots of different ways to get the data in the right hands. So I wanted to mention that. So what I want to do next, I want to build you a quick report and just kind of show you the ins and outs of this. Now, obviously today we've got about 25 minutes left. Don't look at this as a training. That's not the intention. I don't expect you to be an expert after watching a 45-minute demo, but I did want to mention on our website, cosmosdatatech.com, is our full training library. So you can dig in, self-serve at any time. None of this is gated. In addition to that is our full knowledge base. So if you want to come in and look up certain things like grouping, how do I do that in Excel using Cosmos? Well, I can come in here and see that there's a video walkthrough, there's a step-by-step follow the bouncing ball. So however you like to learn is going to be available to you. In addition to that, one of the great things about Integrato, they're a partner that learns products before they recommend them to customers. And so they have folks that are trained up on Cosmos. They can support you. Obviously, our team would support you as well. But between the two of our groups, we're going to make sure you get some real training and help writing reports and things like that. So what I want to do, I'm just going to come into this finance folder. There's nothing in it. I just use it so I can remember to delete my demo stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and create a new report. So what we're going to do, just for example's sake and fitting in the time here, I'm just going to build like a monthly income statement by company or something like that. So we'll go ahead and create that report. So what that's going to do is open up a new Excel file where I'm going to build out all the logic for my report. So for starters, we want to come in here and we want to give it a title. So we'll call it our monthly income statement by company. And we can say we want to list out our GL account numbers and the name of the account. Maybe for fun, we'll bring in the category it's in and the subcategory. And finally, we'll get our months going across columns. So what I'm going to do now is just format things a little bit. I'm not going to spend a lot of your time on Excel formatting today because I'm sure everyone on this call knows how to use Excel to that level. But we'll give ourselves a little bit of room and we'll say that's going to be our template. So aside from sprinkling in bits of Excel as we build this, we're going to use the Cosmos Excel add-in to drive the majority of this report development. So over here on the right, these are kind of your operators that you're going to use to create any report you want, whether it's sales, finance, inventory, AP, AR, etc. It doesn't matter. Everything is authored in a uniform data agnostic approach. So once you learn these things, you can apply it to whatever report you want to create. So for starters, I want to come in and add some filters or report options. So when I run this report, what can I toggle? Is it dates, departments, companies, locations, etc.? And one of the things I'll point out to you is notice how clean your BC data is. It's very organized, it's very intuitive, and that's the beauty of the data warehouse approach that we take behind the scenes. we're not expecting users to be database experts, right? Just because you have a BC license doesn't mean you understand the 1,700 tables and 53,000 fields and how they all relate and tie together. And that's one of the things that a data warehouse solves for. Gives you data that's organized, cleaned, consolidated. So for example, there's a table in here in Cosmos, out of the box, right? We have an out of the box data warehouse. But you'll see here that there's a table called sales transactions, and it's very comprehensive, as you can see on the screen. Well, the reason for that is that this single reporting table for sales transactions is pulling together 8 Business Central tables. So again, you don't have to be the expert and know, where does all this stuff live? How does it relate together? How do I link and join tables? That's already done for you. So we'll talk more about the data side in a bit. But again, very easy, clean, user-friendly data to work with. So we're adding in some filters or report options. Let's say I want to add one for year. Well, I can just find as I type. Obviously, I know that's going to live in my date table, but just to make it easy, we'll type in year. Everything will filter down. We'll throw in a default value. We can toggle this later when we run it, and that's it. If I want more filters, I just rinse and repeat. I want one for company. I want one for my dimension values, whatever it is. Just add as many as you'd like. So that's step 1. Step 2, totally optional, used a ton, so I like to show it, and that's the ability to break out reports across sheets automatically. So maybe I do have multiple companies and I want a separate income statement for each company. Well, I can just say, split out my companies when you build out this report. And so if I had 5 companies and I didn't filter this down, I'm going to get 5 different income statements, one for each company. Now that's powerful in itself, but one of the other really slick things that Cosmos can do that a lot of tools just can't is what we call parent-child relationships. So maybe on sheet 1, we want all of our companies consolidated on a single income statement. Then we want a separate income statement as a child sheet for each company. Below each company sheet, we want to break out by department for that company, right? That's the kind of stuff you can do, kind of nested or hierarchical reports across those sheets. Now, next thing we want to do is we want to list out data. So when this report runs, we want to see all this information copied down. So I'm going to grab below my headers. I'm going to go to my GL transactions, and I'm going to start by listing out my GL account numbers. Now, I could click save, but that's going to give me my whole chart of accounts in one long list, and I don't want that in my income statement. So what I would do is just filter down which accounts we're going to list out here. So I could just come in here, for example, and say, give me the accounts in my 40,000s because those are my revenue accounts. Now, to be clear, you don't need to use ranges. You could point to a category in BC, a subcategory, individual accounts, combinations, exclude accounts, whatever you want to do. But I will tell you a best practice whenever possible is to use a range, a category, or a subcategory. And the reason for that is it will future-proof the report. So, 6 months after you built this, you go add 4 accounts into BC. Well, you don't have to come mess with your reports. They're going to automatically pick up those new 4 accounts because they're going to fall in a range, a category, or a subcategory. So wanted to mention that. So all we did there is we said, hey, in this column, list out those 40,000s, but while you do that, drag all this stuff down. So we'll see how that's going to work in a minute. Now, I also want this monthly. So I'm going to grab the shape of a column, and I'm going to tell Cosmos to list out the months in the year. So we'll go ahead and click save. And now when this report runs, we're going to see Jan, Feb, March, April right across my workbook. So now I want to add my fields into the report. And the beauty of a data warehouse, they're relational data sets. They're smart, right? They're going to guide you to what you're looking for. So we want to get the name of this GL account number. So I'll open this up. We'll see there's a table called GL account. And I'm just going to say, drop in the GL account name and the category and the subcategory. Finally, we want to aggregate or sum up my amounts by month. So I'll go to GL transactions and I'll say, sum up my amounts. Since this is an income statement, I want those revenue values positive. So I'm going to flip that sign, reverse that. And then down here at the bottom, I just want to point out all my filtering is plumbing up as I go. So when it gives me the sum here, or the total, it's going to be for the company on this sheet, since we split those out, the GL account to the left, the month in each column it creates based on the year we enter as a report option. And if I want to be extra prim and proper, I could just add a filter to say, hey, exclude my closing entries. I don't want those to sneak into my numbers, and we'll click save. So at this point, we're basically done with this report. The majority is already built out. So what I would do here is get my total revenue line, and I can format that however I'd like. And then what about COGS? What about expenses? Well, I could rebuild those steps, but it'd be a waste of time. I'm just going to copy this entire chunk and paste it down. And I'll do the same thing here. I'll paste it down again. Down at the bottom, we can put our net income. I can use Excel just to sum these values up. And then I'll just format a little bit further. We'll put our top and double bottom border. We'll change this label from revenue to COGS. We'll change this one from revenue to expenses. And then I typically like to align these on the left. So to show you what I did there, we built out that first list where we said, list out my 40,000s. Then we built one for our months going across columns. And then we copied that 40,000 section 2 more times. So you can probably guess where I'm going here, but I'm just going to change which accounts I want here. So I want my 50,000s because those are my COGS accounts. Same thing here. We don't want our 40,000s again. We want our 60,000s. And I'll just take that out through the end of my account string. We'll click save. So at this point, I'm done with my report. In a real life example, I would preview it. So I'd say, hey, go ahead and run this and show me what the output's going to look like. And what that would do is open it in a new tab. That way I can drag that to my other monitor, look at that, make any tweaks or edits to the template as I see fit. But once I'm good to go, I'm going to close out of here. We have very strong version control everywhere in the product. So I could say, you know what, I'm going to check this in and I'm going to say, built new monthly IS by company, and we'll check that report in. And that's going to basically save that version behind the scenes. So if we ever make tweaks or edits to this and we break something in the report, we can always just revert back to that previous version. But at this point, we're good to go. So we see we have our new report in my finance folder. I can run this. Over here on the right, there's that year filter we added. So I just did one filter, but we could have a bunch here. We can disable the filter, interact with it, toggle it, whatever we need to do. And I'll go ahead and run the report. Everything, once again, will spin up here in the cloud. We see that our report is running. And to be clear, there's no strain on Business Central. Users aren't locked out of Excel while reports are running like the legacy tools do. Everything is happening in the cloud. So now we can see, and I didn't use freeze panes, I could have kept all this tighter, but now we can see we have a nice clean income statement by month. With our accounts going down, months going across, net income at the bottom. We have a sheet for each of our companies that we built out automatically. And so, that's the fundamental idea of how you build reports in Cosmos. So at this point, anytime I need to run this, it's going to look and feel identical. It's just going to have the data for the filter approach I take when I run the report. So again, I know we're covering a lot. If you have questions, toss them into that meeting chat, but I'm going to jump forward here and we're going to keep moving. So that's kind of the Excel side of things, kind of the Excel front end piece. So the next thing I want to talk to you about a little bit is Power BI and how that fits into this equation. So first thing, if you're not using Power BI or if you're not familiar with it, Power BI is a low-cost data visualization suite from Microsoft. It's a fantastic product. I've used it for, 8 or 9 years now. It's a really great solution. But to be clear, it's a data visualization tool. That is what it's for. I get a lot of customers that are kind of confused and they say, well, we're thinking we're just going to do everything in Power BI. And I'm like, well, that's not what it's for. It's not going to do your financials, right? You're not going to take your board level financials and build them here because this is more about visuals. So whereas Excel is very strong at rows and columns, quick calculations and formatting, that's kind of Power BI's weak spot. On the other hand, Excel is kind of weak when it comes to visuals and dashboards. Well, that's Power BI's strength. And so it's not an either or. They're really complementary solutions. Now, the thing to understand about Power BI is it's what we call a BYOD analytics tool, which means bring your own data. Power BI can hook up to just about anything out there, but that's where the journey really starts. In the case of Business Central, Microsoft ships Power BI with some pre-built API layers. Those are going to expose a very limited set of tables and fields. You're not going to see your custom tables and fields. You're not going to see all the base tables and fields. So the first thing you have to do is you have to modify those APIs. You have to expose additional tables and fields. Once you've done that, you have the tables and fields, but you still can't use them because they're not relational. Power BI, the way it works, it doesn't have that logic inherently. You have to tell it how all these tables tie together. Now, the bad part of that is for business users, they don't have the skill set to do that because that's a coding exercise. You're writing SQL code, DAX code, Power Query, MDX languages. It's not something that makes it easy for a typical business user to leverage. And I've always argued, despite Power BI being a fantastic product, it's not an end-to-end solution standalone in the hands of business users because, again, we don't know how to write code. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to get your semantic model or your star schema here in Power BI. And so what I'm really saying there is, well, I need to report on some sales information. Well, that lives in this table. But that's not very valuable if I don't have items and salespeople and customers and dates and dimensions. Well, those live in different tables. So again, you would have quite the body of work to get all that built out. Now, here's the good news. So Power BI loves a data warehouse as a data source because the data is relational. Everything's tied together already. So this schema is actually directly out of Cosmos on day one. So all I did is I connected Power BI to Cosmos. I pulled in the sales information I care about, and now I can just easily do the fun part of Power BI. I can drag and drop what it is I want to see onto the canvas. So I could say, well, we want to see sales by salesperson on this visual, and we want to see sales by item categories, so I can see what they're selling. And I want to see where we're selling the most products. So maybe I bring in some location and I bring in sales amount or whatever it is. So the key takeaway there is that once the data is addressed, which is what Cosmos does with the data warehouse, Power BI becomes significantly easier to use. The data's all there, it's all consistent, you're dragging and dropping, and you're building out your nice, robust dashboards and visuals. So when you're done, you can beautify it, put a title, some slicers, format things further, and then you would traditionally you would publish that up to powerbi.com. At that point, you'd put this dashboard in a workspace, share it out with users, et cetera, and then users would typically go log into powerbi.com and access the content. Now, to be clear, you can also embed these into Teams or Business Central or other Microsoft applications, but what we tend to see in a real life use case is customers are going out to powerbi.com, signing in there, and interacting with this stuff. Well, the feedback from the market was really interesting because they said, as you would expect, I don't want to have to juggle 5 different endpoints every day to get the data I need to do my job. I don't want to have to log into Cosmos and run 10 reports, then go log into powerbi.com and run 4 reports, then log into Business Central and run 6 reports. Like it's not a very clean approach. So what we were asked to do is bring it all full circle. So obviously, as we've seen, we have our Excel front end here. We have all the Excel-based reports that we need. Well, since I'm logged in with my Microsoft credentials, I can actually click on Power BI and it authenticates on my behalf and shows me any of the workspaces, reports, or dashboards that I should have access to. Now that it's authenticated, I can actually log in here real quick because I haven't signed in, but I'll do a 1-click. And we'll see that I can actually launch Power BI directly inside of Cosmos. So now I can come in and interact with my reports or dashboards that are Power BI in nature and see those in one place. So 2 seconds ago, I was in Excel reports. Well, I want the macro level view, so I'm going to come over here and click on Power BI. And again, you can get to these from your favorites section as well. So it really gives you the best of both worlds. And like I said, Power BI is awesome. I mean, there's just so much you can do with it, right? You can come in here and query your data. So you could say, I'm in a meeting and Robert says, well, what were sales last year? I could just say, hey, show me sales by year. it queries my Cosmos data warehouse and builds out that visual or that information so I can continue the meeting. So that's the Power BI side of things. Now, the last thing I want to touch on just real quick, and then we'll answer any open questions and wrap up here, is the data model side of things. So to be clear, this is all about the data. And obviously, our data is our source of truth. We don't want a lot of hands in the cookie jar. So that is a specific permission that you would give people access to. So not every user is going to have access to your data models. And to be clear, if they don't have access, this whole section would just go away when they log into Cosmos. If we didn't have them as an admin, this whole section would just disappear. So you can give out, like I said, those kind of granular roles that you want people to have. Now, I do have data model access. And so just to talk to you a little bit about that, I'm going to check out this kind of pre-built data warehouse that we have, and I'll just give you a quick and dirty example of how this stuff works. So to be clear, for the folks on this call, you may never use this part of the product, and that's totally okay. Robert's team is trained, as I mentioned, our team can help, or maybe you do want to take ownership of it. But the thing that's most important to understand is that 95% of what you care about from a data perspective is going to be here on day one. That's the whole concept of the pre-built data warehouse. Then when we bring on a new customer, we'll tailor it, right? We'll spend an hour or two and just kind of fit it to your business specifically. So there's a lot on the screen here. This is actually all developed and laid out based on customer feedback. But just to kind of talk you through it. So on the left-hand side, we're going to see our source tables from Business Central. So these are the ones that we're pulling data from out of the box into my day one data warehouse in Cosmos. Now, before I forget to mention this, we do have ways to bring in other data as well, stuff that lives outside of Business Central. So we can bring data in from Azure SQL databases, Excel files, Dataverse. So if you're using like D365 sales or marketing or any other of the CRM applications, we can bring in data and marry that all up so that you have a nice comprehensive data set. But you'll see these are the tables we're pulling data from. Well, when I click on this little plus, this is my BC database. So this is every single table, field, per tenant extension, custom tables and fields, absolutely everything. And the reality is most of these tables from a reporting perspective aren't useful. 90% of this isn't going to help you create any reports. So there's a lot of clutter here. And for example, no one I've ever met is building reports out of their XML buffer table. It doesn't mean anything to you. So with the data warehouse, we're able to pick the tables we actually care about and then marry those up into a clean set of reporting tables. So what we call that is like denormalizing the Business Central table and field structure. So for example, I have a table here in my data warehouse called the customer table. And we can see within that table, here are the fields that we're pulling in. Well, maybe you've worked with Integrato's team and they built some custom field in this table. We'll pretend it's this address field. And you want to use that in your reports. Well, all we're going to do is select that field. It's now in what we call staging. So it's sitting there. We just haven't put it anywhere. And then I can come into my reporting tables. I can come to my customer table and I can say, I want to add a new field in here. And at this point, I can call it what BC calls it, which is address, or I can caption it. I could call it something completely different. I could call it customer location, right? Totally up to you. But we'll click save, and that's it. I just showed you how to add a field into your data warehouse. So again, I won't go deep on this today. I just want to drive home the concept that this is all automated. This is modern. You're not writing code. You're not writing SQL. This is just a point-click interface to make the data so much easier to work with for your business users. At this point, I can close out. I could check it in and put some comments so we keep that version history. And I could say, added in the address field per Robert's request. And if we ever need to restore or roll back, we can do that. Last thing I want to mention, so data warehouses, incredibly valuable. It's the modern way to do this. It's Microsoft's recommended way to do this. They provide speed and performance, ease of use, consolidation, all those good things. The one thing to keep in mind is that data warehouses, they're not inherently real time. They're what we call near real time. And so The way it works is that your data is going to refresh every night on a scheduled basis. You choose when it is. So maybe at 3 a.m. it refreshes. Then you can schedule a couple more of those. So maybe you want it to run at 3 a.m. and then 10 a.m. and 12 o'clock and 2 p.m. And you know in those intervals, the data is quote unquote real time. So that's kind of how most customers do the majority of their reporting. But we also understand that there are going to be times where you need the real-time reporting. Maybe it's month end, maybe you just posted a batch of transactions. And so for that reason, there's a button here you can click whenever you need to that triggers what's called an incremental load. So they happen very fast because they're incremental. But what that means is it tells Cosmos, hey, go look at Business Central, pull in anything new, anything modified, and update my data set. So if it's month end, you posted a bunch of stuff, you need to rerun the financials, you click one extra button. In 15, 20, 30 seconds, your data's all synced up, and then you just come back and run the report, and you're going to see the real-time information. So that's how data warehouses work. Again, the value of a data warehouse is enormous, but I wanted to mention that piece as well. So in summary today, we talked about kind of the home page and what all's going on there. We talked about the report section, pre-built reports, authoring new reports, organization, folders, list views, grid views, however you want to kind of set things up. We talked about running reports, scheduled reports. We talked about Power BI, the two-way integration there. We talked about the users and all the roles associated. But hopefully that was a good comprehensive overview. I mean, I would tell you this is our website. These are public customer reviews. People love this product. It's a fantastic solution. We don't really see customer churn. People tend to buy it. They're happy. They love it. They stay on it. But yeah, it's a fantastic tool. And then on that note, I did want to mention, just because we talked about this at the start, but we do have a special offer. So I worked with the Integrato team, and they said, we really want our customers using this because we understand the value of it. We have lots of customers already that are Integrato customers using the product. But for webinar attendees today that purchase Cosmos by January 31st, 2026, you'll actually get 20% off your first year of annual subscription for the platform. And I know you haven't seen our pricing, but with our annual subscription, that's already the equivalent of 10 months of monthly subscription. So if you do the annual prepaid route, not only are you going to save the 2 months a year, but you're going to get 20% off your first year. So if you have questions on that, reach out to Robert, Graciela, anyone on the Integrato team that can coordinate, or we can set up another call to talk about anything or whatever makes sense. But I wanted to open it up real quick. If there are any questions, feel free to throw those into the little Q&A box on the webinar interface. So I'll give just a minute for that, and we'll see if there's any questions. Otherwise, we can wrap things up and let you get on with your day. And we'll give people just another minute here. Any questions at all, feel free to type them in. All right. I'm not seeing any questions, so I think we're good to go for today. I did want to, again, thank Robert and Graciela and the Integrato team for setting this up. Obviously want to thank all of you who took valuable time out of your day to attend this. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully it was valuable. I'm sure the Integrato team will get the recording posted somewhere or sent out, so feel free to reach out if you need that. Otherwise, I'm sure they'll handle that. Again, sorry for the audio issue. Robert was going to kind of do the intro and outro, but GoToWebinar was not cooperating. So appreciate everyone's time today. Hope you have a great rest of your day and a great holiday season. If you're interested in the promo, reach out. And thank you all again for your time, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.